Welcome to the Seattle Investors Club podcast with Julie Clark and Joe Bauer, where we share the nuts and bolts of real estate investing from our 20-plus years in the industry. Sit back, relax, listen, and immediately take action. Are you ready? Here we go.
Welcome to the Nuts and Bolts of Real Estate podcast. My name is Joe Bauer, and I'm here with my co-host, Julie Clark. Julie, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Joe, because today I get to sit back in the back seat of this podcast and let my friend Jennifer Beadles here run the show. Jennifer and I have been talking and we thought, hey, it's good to get some 1031 updates going on and some little deep dive on 1031 exchanges with everything happening in our world today. So we're lucky enough to have Kyle Williams with us today from Investment Property Exchange Services in Bellevue. But before we jump into all that, we need to know what you're up to, Joe. What are you up to? Where are you at? Besides
Honestly,
in the van?
I had to look and see where we were before the show so that I would be ready for this question. And we're in John Day, Oregon, which I've never been to before, but it's kind of just like on the way to Moab, and it's a way that we hadn't gone before. So we're in John Day, Oregon.
Is that where you're headed? Is over to Moab?
Yeah, that's our next stop.
Now, Jennifer, aren't you out there somewhere?
I am in Kanab, Utah. So, Joe, we'll have to meet up at some point along the way. Yes, absolutely loving Kanab.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely keep in touch.
I, unfortunately, like Kyle, is stuck here in my office in Seattle, driving kids to school, living the normal life here. But I digress. Let's jump into it today. I'm going to let Jennifer introduce Kyle, and we'll kick this off and get to know Kyle a little bit better and hopefully know a lot more about the updates on 1031s and how we can take advantage of those these days while they still exist.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Julie. Thank you, Joe, for bringing me back on. I'm really excited about this guest today, Kyle Williams. So I met Kyle, a couple of years ago, and maybe, 4 or 5 1031 exchanges ago. And I've been in the real estate industry and a real estate investor for about 14 years. And I did my first 1031 exchange a couple of years ago. And I had a lot of misconceptions about what I could and couldn't do. But I knew that I wanted to sell some properties that were kind of a pain, to be honest. I wanted to sell the property, a couple of single family houses that we had, and I wanted to go bigger. And so I got connected with Kyle. Kyle is the VP at IPX 1031 Exchange in Bellevue. And Kyle is able to do 1031 exchanges all across the country. So it's not just limited to Washington State. And really, that's what I was hoping to do. I was hoping to sell some of my single family houses in Washington and invest in other areas that I felt made more sense from a cash flow standpoint. So Kyle is here to talk all about 1031 exchanges. So there's a lot going on with some proposed changes to 1031 exchanges. We really wanted to get this information out. So again, thank you, Julie, for bringing us on, because we want to really educate investors on what the possibilities are and then kind of prepare them for what may or may not be to come. So Kyle, first question is, what is a 1031 exchange? What do investors need to know about 1031 exchanges?
I'm gonna back you. Wait a minute. I'm gonna back you guys up for a minute, because we want to, before we do that, this is just our way. We want to get to know Kyle. Tell us your backstory first before we jump into that. Let's hear Joe, go for it. What do we normally ask people here, just so we get to know you better?
We want to know, who you are, Kyle. Where'd you come from? Where'd you grow up? How did you get into the 1031 exchanges? All that fun stuff.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm actually a native Washingtonian, which is seemingly rare and rarer these days. I went to the Central Washington University and got a degree in poli-sci and history, and actually went into the financial world shortly thereafter. Bought my first property a couple of years out of college. But the firm I worked for, we did a lot of private placements and some REITs, and then it just naturally evolved into 1031 and my love for real estate and the investment side of things. But other than that, I love Washington. Jennifer mentioned that she's done a few exchanges, and I think that's something we'll talk about too. But Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of investors leave the state, which is, it's definitely sad to see. It makes a lot of sense though. But yeah, as a native Washingtonian, I love it up here and want the best for all of us.
Good stuff. Awesome stuff. All right. Sorry, guys, to jump in there. We always like to start with that. Throws off my flow if I don't get to have my questions answered like that. So, all right. Back to you, Jennifer.
All right. So, Kyle, tell us what investors need to know and what basically what a 1031 is.
Yeah. So a 1031 allows an investor to sell their investment property and use all the equity, not just the after-tax equity, to reinvest into something bigger, better. So like if someone sells a $1 million duplex in Ballard that they've owned forever, it's fully depreciated. If they're going to, instead of only being able to reinvest, say 750 or 800,000 after taxes, they get to reinvest that full $1 million. So if you look at if they want to apply leverage, at a 75% LTV, they can buy $4 million of property instead of $3 million just because they didn't pay their taxes. And as you guys know, $1 million of income, even if it's a low cap rate, is still a lot of money annually. So the 1031 at the end of the day allows investors to use more of their equity and keep more of their money working for them.
Amazing. And then what are some of the common misconceptions about the 1031 exchange?
So like kind is a common misconception. And one of the most common questions I get, Kyle, I'm selling land. I guess that means I have to buy land, right? Not necessarily. So like kind is a wide swath of different types of investment property. You could even have water rights in our state, timber rights, perpetual easements, 30-year leases, all this crazy stuff that you wouldn't even think. You can really get off into the weeds for like kind of what you can exchange in and out of. But rentals, commercial, industrial land, it all qualifies as being exchangeable with each other. So the better question is what doesn't qualify? The big ones would be personal use properties like primary residences, second homes. Flips do not qualify. This is something that a lot of people don't know. And they'll say, well, Kyle, I'm investing money. That's what this flip is. Well, that's not how the IRS looks at it. They view it as inventory, which is why builders, why Toll Brothers doesn't do 1031 exchanges. That's their business. They need to pay taxes just like the rest of us. So flips don't qualify. And then new developments to be sold don't qualify either. But other than that, most stuff probably does qualify.
And then how long does an investor need to own the property in order to qualify for the 1031 exchange sale?
So good question. 1031, there's a lot of basic rules, 45 days to find new property after you close on your sale, to 180 days to complete the exchange and buy new property. But ultimately, holding period is one of those gray area things. So if flips don't qualify, then yeah, the natural logical next question is, well, how long do you have to hold for then to distinguish it from a flip? The IRS hasn't defined that. But many CPAs I've worked with and talked to that know a lot about real estate in Section Code 1031 will say, just because the IRS doesn't define it in Section Code 1031 doesn't mean that when they say long-term intent, they don't mean 1 year or more. So a lot of CPAs will say, if you hold for a year and get some rents on it, whether it's full-time or an Airbnb thing, whatever that is, you're probably going to be okay. If you wanted to be super conservative and just remove all doubt, you probably want to hold for 2 years and still get some rents on it. But ultimately, it comes down to the tax advisor. That being said, we've seen plenty of exchanges that have held for less than a year do 1031 exchanges. Their intent is to hold long term, but they may buy a property in January, a duplex for say 700,000. They get an unsolicited offer that October from a developer who buys a city block for 900,000. And they're like, I can't say no to this offer. I've already put tenants in there. My intent wasn't to sell it. I didn't go to a broker and say, Jennifer, listen, sell this property for me. I was approached unsolicited by this developer. My intent wasn't to flip this property. And so their CPA will say, yeah, absolutely. Do a 1031 exchange. We can prove what your intent was. You don't have a history of flipping, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So even if you don't hold for a year, we'd still say, unless it's a flip or like personal use, then yeah, you're not going to do an exchange. But if there's any uncertainty there, clients need to talk to their CPA and their tax advisor because we can't guide them. we're a disinterested party, so we can't be their CPA or their attorney or their financial advisor. So they need to seek their own counsel. But at the end of the day, a lot of tax advisors are okay with the intent, even if it is less than a year. But again, it's every case is different.
I got a question for you, Kyle.
Sure.
What's the current COVID? Are there, as far as the 45 days and the 180 days, is there a change or is there a COVID overlay or something going on right now with that?
Good question. So extensions are only issued for federally declared disasters. So think like, wildfires in Southern California, Hurricane Katrina, stuff like that. Basically national news type stories, acts of God, if you will. But other than that, there aren't really extensions issued. In COVID, there were brief extensions issued last April, which pushed everything until, I think, July 15th, if I remember correctly. So there were brief extensions issued, but those have all expired as of, whatever that is, about 9 or 10 months ago. So right now, we're still using the same rules that we always work off of: 45 days to identify new property, 180 days to close.
Gotcha. Or do you see people do, how often do you see people do partial exchanges? Is that something that happens?
Good. I'm glad you brought that up. That never really comes up except with conversations with clients. Partial exchanges are super, super common. They almost seem like the norm now because, if you're selling
what's the definition to you of a partial exchange so people understand what we're talking about?
So in a 1031 exchange, you really just need to do two things: buy for equal or greater value, and that's really sales price less the closing cost, but we'll just say sales price. Buy for equal or greater value and reinvest whatever proceeds you have. That's all you have to do in the 1031 exchange. But a partial exchange would be, someone wants to take money out. They are going to pay what's called boot, or as I call it, taxes on part of the money. So a common scenario would be, someone sells a duplex in Everett for $650,000. It's all equity, but they need to take $100,000 out and pay off junior's college education, or use it for primary residence renovations, or whatever the case is. So they're going to pay taxes on the $100,000, and then the balance they're going to defer on, and that's super common. People will say, you know what, I'm fine paying some taxes, I just don't want to get hit with a mega tax bill, and I need this $100,000, for other things. So so people don't have to buy for equal or greater value and reinvest all their proceeds. They just need to know that they'll pay tax on whatever they don't.
Yeah, right. Good one.
And I think another common misconception, Kyle, I get asked a lot. Investors think that if they're selling one property, they need to buy another property, but they don't realize that they can buy multiple properties. Yeah. So kind of explain how that works.
So clients can actually mix and match sales and purchases. So a lot of times clients will think, I'm selling a rental and I need to buy another rental. And as I've told you about Like Kind, you can buy many different types of properties. But the other caveat to that is that you don't necessarily have to buy one property. You can buy like 3 or 4. You can sell 4 and buy 2. You can mix and match any number you want. But what a lot of people have done is, they're selling that $1 million investment property in Wallingford that they've been renting out forever, and it's all equity, and they're going to use that and put that down on 5 or 6 properties in like Tennessee or Texas or Florida, for example, where they have higher cap rates and they feel comfortable diversifying outside the region here. And so it's not a 1-for-1 in many scenarios. In many scenarios, it's 2, 3, 4, maybe even a portfolio of properties. I mean, we've seen people buy 30 or 40 properties in a portfolio, if not more. So clients aren't limited to just one property.
What's the up to, you can identify up to 3 properties thing? I thought that was a thing.
So great question. So you can identify up to 3 properties. That's a rule that many people use. However, if that doesn't work, I mean, if you're going to buy in you want to buy an investment property in Yakima, your dollar is going to go a lot further than it does in Bellevue. So you may be able to buy 4 or 5 properties. So in that scenario, if you're over 3 properties, you would go to what's called the 200% rule, meaning that clients can identify any number of properties that total no more than 200% of what they sold for. So if they sell for like $900,000, they could identify any number of properties totaling up to $1.8 million. So that might be, 5 or 6 $300,000 rentals in Spokane, for example, or like, Nashville. But if those two rules don't work, if they want to identify, say, 6 properties at 300% of what they sold for, the first 2 rules don't work. Like if someone's going to buy a portfolio of properties and they've exceeded both those 2 rules, they go to what's called the 95% exception rule. I call it the all or none rule, because there's no cap on, you can identify whatever you want. But the catch is that you need to close on 95% of the value that you identify. Otherwise, the entire exchange has failed and it's all taxable. So really the most common scenario we would see that play out is if someone is indeed buying a portfolio of properties and they say, you know what, I'm either going to buy this portfolio or just walk away and pay the taxes. But other than that, there's going to be a rule that works for everyone. And I can definitely help go over that with people if they need help with it. And in addition to their CPA and tax advisor.
So there's no like substitution of identified properties. Once you identify them, you're sort of locked into those that you've identified. You can't swap them out.
So everything is set in stone on day 46. But that being said, within the 45 days, you can change your identification. So yeah, Julie, if you get under contract on day 27 on a couple of properties and they fall out for whatever reason, you can't end up closing on them and it's still within the 45 days, you can re-identify.
So my question, sorry, Jennifer, I'm hijacking you a little bit here. See, I told you I couldn't stop. I can't stop myself. How often do you see people that like I said, this partial exchange, do you ever find that there's people that then close the gap on that leftover amount? So they've identified a property. It's not going to take care of it. It's a partial exchange. Sorry guys. And so they use like a DST to gap the difference. You see that happening?
Yeah, DSTs have really taken off. I mean, DSTs have been around for, I think it was 2005 or so. 2004 is when really the structure itself was given the go-ahead by the IRS. But really the last, couple of years is when we've seen DSTs really, really take off. And DSTs, do you want me to go and give a brief overview of DSTs?
And versus what a syndication is, because I don't know if both those can be used or what. I'm assuming.
So, syndications are not exchangeable because you're not buying an interest in real property. You're buying an interest in essentially a partnership in a syndication. So in a 1031, you need to buy interest and go on title in real property. The DST, a lot of people will compare them to REITs, and the caveat is that you need to talk to a financial advisor if anyone wants to learn more about these, because they're securities and it's nothing that we handle or have any affiliation with. But at the end of the day, DSTs are compared to REITs a lot, even though they're not like REITs. REITs are investments in companies that invest in real estate. That's a very, very broad view of a REIT. But a DST, a Delaware Statutory Trust, you're investing in a fractional interest of the property along with other people. You're just paying a trustee to manage it and make the decisions and everything. So it's kind of...
You feel like you're in a syndication. It's just the paperwork different.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely has the same feel. The difference is that you're a true owner of the property and it is exchangeable from a 1031 standpoint. So yeah, a lot of people, they, especially like as they get older, you could have a Boeing engineer that owns half a dozen rentals in the area and, 3 of them have turned into meth houses and, landlords, tenants won't pay rent in the other 2. And it's just, he or she is retired. They're sick of this. They just want something where they don't have to worry about it. So they'll find a DST that's like an Amazon warehouse in Oklahoma City. And they'll say, well, I can get, 4 or 5% from this and Amazon is my tenant. I literally never have to worry about them paying their rent on time. I'm just going to get a check every month. It's all passive. And so that draws especially a lot of older people that don't want to manage properties and just want something safe and passive. And again,
they don't want to do a seller financing because those are the ones that you talk through. I mean, even myself talking through seller financing as an alternative for those people. And a lot of times they're like, I just don't want to deal with it.
Correct.
It's not risky for them, and they find that they go towards those DSTs,
Yeah. And I should say that I use the word safer. DSTs are technically securities at the end of the day. So, they are issued by prospectus and there are risks associated with them. So I should never say that any security is safe at all. But clients do feel a level of safety that they may not feel with other properties. But again, it's up to clients and their financial advisors to do their due diligence and risk tolerance.
There you go, Jennifer. That's your new project. You need to start your own DST. Yeah, that's going to be your phase 4 goal. I'm too lazy now to do any of that. But let me know if you start one, right?
Sure. In all my free time. I'll add that to the list. So Kyle, so as we're getting into maybe some of these more advanced strategies, Kyle, we've had several investors that were looking into a tenant in common 1031 exchange. So Can you talk a little bit about how that works? This would be in the scenario where we have investors that want to pool their funds together to buy maybe a larger apartment complex, but still do that within the 1031 exchange guidelines.
So TIC structures are doable. Like the 5 of us, the 4 of us, I should say, could all sell
If you had an imaginary friend next to you, Kyle.
So we could all sell a rental, for example, and combine to buy a commercial property where each of us is a 25% owner and we're a tenant in common structure. The problem is with TIC structures is that we all basically need to agree on everything when we sell the property, all that stuff. And it's like, I don't even agree with myself half the time, let alone, with all these other people. And it's like, I could get along great with like Jennifer and her husband, but we don't see eye to eye on this, that, or the other. And then it's like, it can be a huge problem. Whereas the DSTs, you essentially have a predetermined length of time to hold it. You're not making decisions on when to sell it or what have you. So they're a little bit different in that sense. But yeah, TIC structures, I mean, if there's people, and TIC structures are common. So yeah, if there's people that you're agreeable with and feel comfortable owning property with, then by all means, a TIC structure can work.
I think there's a little side trick. I don't want to say it's good or bad. Depends on what side of the coin you're on. I think if you're in a partnership like that or something like that. Now, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a 1031 person. I'm not even that smart, but I'm going to just throw something out there. Sure. Is it possible? I believe this has happened within my world many times, that the partners of that partnership could essentially buy out that fourth problem partner or whoever they don't want to allow to exchange, almost like assign their interest. And then those remaining partners, that person's out, they got paid out, and then they move forward with the exchange. Otherwise, I agree. Like my understanding is everybody has to move forward together. But if you got one outlier.
Yeah. So like this is a huge IRS gray area when what you're talking about are called drop and swaps. And so this is definitely something that clients always need to see. Drop and swap. Yeah.
I want to get a shirt that says drop and swap. We got to keep it light here. We don't want to get serious. Next time we're on a podcast, Joe's going to have a hat that says drop and swap, and we'll see.
Well, so when people, now I'm going to get off into the weeds here, but when people say they don't ever want to pay taxes, we call that swapping until you drop. Swap until you drop. Okay. So, but with the drop and swap that we're talking about now, someone would deed out before closing of the sale and they would go their separate way. So like, let's say the 4 of us are in an LLC together and we get really sick of Jennifer and she doesn't want to be with us. So we'll deed her out as a tenant in common, say a month before closing, and then she can do whatever she wants. If she wants to do an exchange, she can. If she wants to just cash out, she can. But our LLC, we've been paying the taxes. We can continue and do the exchange, but where the risk comes is Jennifer has really owned the property for a month. She hasn't been paying taxes on it. The LLC has been paying taxes, yet she's asking for preferential tax treatment with a 1031. So there can always be IRS issues because really then it looks like a flip, like she only held it for a month and that was it. So whenever this subject comes up, we always tell clients, you need to work closely with your CPA. We can tell you it's risky, but we can't tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't tell you the level of risk. Just, you want to work with a tax advisor and an attorney.
All right. That was in the weeds. Sorry about that.
No.
I got more weeds questions, but I'm going to let Jennifer take over here.
Good.
Yeah. Another question, Kyle, that comes up quite often, and I've had this question myself, is at what point can we tap into that equity on a property that we've bought on a 1031 exchange? So for example, I have an 8-plex that has gone up in value considerably over the last couple of years. I bought it as a 1031 exchange. Am I allowed to then do a cash out refinance and grab back some of that equity?
So this is definitely a CPA question. What I can say is that it's probably safer to do it after the exchange as opposed to before the exchange. So if you're going to do a cash out refi, you'd probably want to wait until after the exchange. But ultimately, it comes down to CPAs, because I've met CPAs that are super aggressive, and they'll say, it doesn't matter. The exchange is over. You can do it. They call it the nanosecond rule. The second that the exchange is done, the equity is yours. You can do with it whatever you want. Most CPAs would say, if you're going to actually put money into that property and do some renovations and stuff, that's a perfectly acceptable use immediately following. But the issue could be is that, I just finished an exchange, and, the next week I do a cash out refi or whatever, tap equity in the property because I want to go buy a $200,000 boat. And potentially, that's not a taxable reportable event, but the IRS could always say, listen, Kyle, you knew what you were doing. You knew if you took that $200,000 out to buy your boat during the exchange, it would have been taxable. So you waited till the day after the exchange to do that. We know what you're doing here, and it's basically tax avoidance.
Well, what if you do it 3 years down the road? It isn't so calculated.
Yeah, so there's not a rule on it. Conservative CPAs would probably say, you know what, just wait a year to be safe. Remove it from the exchange altogether so it's not connected. But it also depends on what it's for. I think most CPAs would say, if you want to put money back into the property, you're working on improving it to increase your investment and rents and everything, go ahead and do that. But yeah, if you're taking out to, take the family to Europe or whatever you're doing with it that's not related to the property, yeah, many CPAs would say to wait for a year, but it depends on everyone's individual tax advisor, because some may not even say to wait at all, that it's not a huge deal.
Hey guys, it's Julie here with a quick break from the show to discuss an opportunity some of you may have interest in, which is to work more closely with me. On almost a daily basis, I get calls from investors and brokers, both new and experienced, asking me for guidance or advice. I love helping you guys out, and it keeps me on my toes too. So with that said, I wanted to let you know that I have a private broker coaching community called the VIP Education Community. And the best part is that it's 100% free. That's right, it's free to join. So whether you're a traditional broker or a broker investor, my VIP education community offers personalized one-on-one coaching from not just me, but also from my experienced broker friends with expertise in all disciplines of real estate and real estate investing. We'll teach and share our modern marketing strategies, our tech and lead generation resources, plus teach you how to identify or offer up opportunities for yourself or for your clients using techniques such as seller financing, lease options, land entitlement deals, BRRRR investing, flipping, multifamily or commercial coaching, whatever you like. We've got it all covered for you. The future of real estate is changing fast, and to stay in the game, it's time to learn about all the options you can offer your buyer and seller clients, as well as, if you want, learn how to use those skills to grow your own real estate portfolio. If you'd like more details about joining my VIP education community, reach out to me at julie@seattleinvestorsclub.com or text me at 206-910-2985, or just send me a Facebook message. My new favorite phrase is community equals confidence. So let's navigate the future of real estate together. Now, back to the show.
Yeah.
Great feedback. So Kyle, I think this is a great opportunity to talk about some of the potential changes that are coming down the line for 1031 exchange.
Sure. So this is a question that has popped up quite a bit. There was an article in Bloomberg, and this had been mentioned during the campaign from the Biden administration that they were going to look to, remove real estate tax loopholes, as many people would call them. Section Code 1031. And we've heard this before. We actually had on our email signatures, back in 2017 or so, after former President Trump took office, to save 1031s, write your congressperson, because even though Trump had made a lot of money on 1031s, we still didn't know. I mean, Congress was like, we didn't know which way they would move with 1031s. So this is like not really new for us. We've been through this before. But yeah, there was an article about a week or two ago in Bloomberg, which is, definitely a major source. And, they said that President Biden's administration is going to be essentially looking at gutting 1031s, maybe moving it to where if your gain's over 500,000, any gain over that would be taxable. And, a lot of people are like, well, if you have more than a $500,000 gain, you deserve to get taxed, this, that, or the other. But around here, as you guys know, a $500,000 gain is not much. I mean, this isn't, Minot, North Dakota, where, a $500,000 gain is a lot of money. $500,000 gain is almost the norm here if you've owned your property for any length of time. And so that would affect a lot of people, a lot of middle-class people, because like none of us are Donald Trump, but we can still be affected by that. And 1031 is literally the greatest wealth building tool in the Internal Revenue Code, because for people who love real estate, there's nothing else that allows you to buy and sell assets over the course of your entire life and really, push taxes back and give you the opportunity to use more of your money for your entire lifetime. I mean, there's nothing else like that. And the majority of people that take advantage of Section Code 1031 are middle-class people. They're mom and pops that own rentals and investment properties. They're not people who own the Trump Taj Mahal. That's just, that's a much smaller percentage. And I would even go further as to say, like if you were to do a 1031 exchange, on a rental, for example, yeah, you may not save as much money as when someone like Donald Trump exchanges a, $100 million building. I mean, he may save far more on taxes than you will, but your tax savings go a lot further for you and your family than they do for him and his family. And so if we think about it like that, middle-class people would be really affected by this. And I said a minute ago, take advantage of Section Code 1031. Section Code 1031 at the end of the day is a net positive to the economy. Ernst & Young just did another study, but I think their last one in 2015 or 2016, if I remember correctly, said that if they got rid of 1031s, it would have a negative net impact of like 120, 130 billion on the economy over a decade. I think PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, was closer to like 160 or 170 billion negative net impact on the economy in their estimation. So, I mean, this has been proven that not only does this help grow wealth for the middle class, this is a huge boon to the economy. Many people, many agents and brokers, like when I do classes for agents and brokers, they'll say, oh, I've been doing this for a few years and I've never been part of a 1031. Well, if you've been doing it for a few years, you have been part of a 1031. You've been on the other side. You've been connected to it somehow. Everyone is. 1031s drive real estate. I mean, from commercial on down to rentals. They got rid of 1031s. It's like, yeah, maybe temporarily, it would free up some inventory. That would be great for everyone, but that would be a short-term fix for housing because so much real estate is driven through 1031s. So yeah, all of us would be affected.
Is the potential that this is a Biden term thing? Like what if he's a one-term president, for example, and somebody comes in and just, changes it back to be a little bit more friendly? Isn't that, I mean, this isn't necessarily like a forever thing, right? Maybe. I don't know. I'm being a glass half full person here.
No, you're right, because with the 2017 tax cut or the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that went into effect January of 2018, they moved the estate tax from 5.6 million per spouse to 11.2 million, essentially per individual. And so they could definitely change that back. I mean, just because they put something in, like moving that, 11.2 could get shoved back down to 5.6 or 1 or any number. So theoretically, if they got rid of 1031s or gutted 1031s, they could come back. But at the end of the day, it's
I see a lot of people sitting there saying, well, I'm just going to wait and see what happens until Biden's out of office, or something like that. I don't know. I'm just making this stuff up, just thinking about is it the forever thing or not? I mean, regardless, I mean, it would suck. I mean, are you guys thinking this is more of a serious event than you guys have been through this before? Is this a little bit more serious?
I mean, I felt just personally, the way we took it in 2017, and it's not to say it's not very serious right now. It's just that, the way I remember it in 2017, it seemed like a lot of people were extremely nervous. And now maybe it's because we've been through this before that it's like, well, let's just not panic. Let's just see how it plays out. But at the end of the day, two things lead me to think we'll probably be okay with it. One is that, again, it's a net positive to the economy and so many jobs and so much growth in the middle class. And it's like, do these politicians really want, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and all these middle class agents and brokers, people like us, calling their office and saying, hey, you ruined, you've taken my job away, housing's down now, we were doing really well and you've ruined it. And so I don't think they want to deal with that. Secondly, people on both sides of the aisle do 1031s. So, a lot of people can say, yeah, Biden's going to do this and Biden's going to do that. It's like, well, it's not really a partisan thing, because at the end of the day, there are probably as many donors for the Democratic class as the Republican class that do 1031s. So it crosses political lines. It's not like only Republicans do 1031s. I mean, people of all shapes and sizes and all political affiliations use 1031 to their benefit to grow wealth. So I don't think that you could, if it's a Trump thing or whatever, I don't think politicians will cut their nose to spite their face and ruin it for all the rest of us.
Well, I have one last weeds question, but I'm going to let Jennifer ask if she's got any more stuff out of her camp before I go on deep into the weeds on something for a second.
Yeah, Kyle. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that feedback. I think a lot of investors have kind of felt this sense of urgency to get their 1031s in right now, but it sounds like there's maybe not as much sense of urgency. There's a little bit of time. And so, it's maybe not as big of an issue as some people are making it right now.
I would say that the risk that what we're seeing more, and the real risk why people are leaving and doing exchanges isn't because of proposed legislation. I mean, I think that is an issue, but it's because they're worried about the state and politics and landlord-tenant laws and everything, and they want to be in simply a more business-friendly state. And it's like, well, how can you say that? Because we have Amazon and Microsoft, we have some of the largest businesses in the world here, but that's different. I mean, Amazon and Microsoft and some of these larger companies, these corporations aren't really playing by the same rules as any of us are. So it's a lot easier to, go after the Jennifer Beadles and the Kyle Williamses of the world and their rentals than it is to go after Amazon, right? So I don't want to say it's definitely not low-hanging fruit, but at the end of the day, it's Washington hasn't been a great state for landlords, for landlord-tenant laws like City of Seattle, and the state itself is not. They're not attracting as many investors as I think are leaving.
Agreed. What states are you seeing most investors trade into right now?
So it's one of 5 states. Like it feels like everyone is exchanging in one of these 5 states. I can't say it's everyone, but yeah, it's probably 3/4 of people. But yeah, it's like clockwork. Idaho, Arizona, Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. Those 5. And it's not like people won't find something in, Omaha, Nebraska, or, Huntsville, Alabama here and there. I mean, that stuff does pop up. But yeah, those 5 states, seems like where every single person I talk to is headed.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing too.
I'm putting on a listing here this week, and the sellers are moving to Austin, you know? Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy stuff.
Yeah, I don't know how happy people in Texas or Tennessee feel about Washingtonians and Californians moving down there, but But I think most of the people that are moving there, are doing so because they support those states and their laws and see it as is a little more, I don't know what the word is, applicable to their lives and their businesses.
I'm going to ask my weeds question now. So,
please,
me guys. So, and maybe this is more of a CPA question, and maybe it won't make any sense. But let's say an investor who's had a bunch of properties puts those properties into a trust for their kids. Okay. And then they want to, part of the 1031 calculation relates to basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when is there any significance about when something goes into a trust in regards to establishing a basis, right? So, for planning purposes, let's say families, like I used to work in commercial real estate and did some big like institutional size land type of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Where I'd work with a mom and pop and purchase their building, and it would be redeveloped into a big apartment building or condo project or something like that. Well, we would have sellers who had elderly parents, let's say, that the kids were going to inherit that property that they've owned forever, right? Say, well, we don't want to sell this property until, our dad passes because of our basis, right? So we get the stepped up basis.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if my weeds question is, if let's say property owner, puts all his rental properties or properties they own into their primary into a trust for their kids. Is there anything, this just came up on my own real estate team. Is there any significance on establishing any basis early for those kids that would receive that property if it goes into a trust? This might not be a question for you. Get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. So it's definitely a CPA question. That being said, we don't trusts and exchanges aren't very common. We still see them, but not common at all.
Because it solves it itself, right? The fact that so like the revocable trust, like
they're still the taxpayers. The trust is not the taxpayer. So it doesn't change any of the basis. The irrevocable trust, which, again, we don't, the irrevocable trust, not common at all. But how that would affect the basis when it goes into the trust and the trust becomes a taxpayer, that's ultimately up to the CPA to pencil out.
Sorry, guys, that was just like a detail question. If putting it into a trust triggers any type of basis establishment floor. So I think we said no, but the real answer is check with the CPA. So
on the revocable side, it's still the trust doesn't become the taxpayer. But on the irrevocable side, the trust becomes a taxpayer. But when they start reporting it, when the basis moves forward with the new taxpayer, I don't know when that would be, what date that would be specifically. But again, if people have questions on irrevocable trust, it's definitely, a CPA and a state attorney issue.
Right on. Good stuff. All right. Anybody else? What else you got, Jennifer? Or are we getting ready to wrap it down here? We're coming close to, I think we're in this thing about 40 minutes right now.
I think, so I want to kind of circle back around to maybe some best practices that I've seen work best for investors when working with a 1031 exchange. So a lot of investors are selling properties in a hot market and going into, Kyle, I 100% agree with you. The investors in our community are buying in Texas, Tennessee, again, we have Florida, Idaho, Arizona. That's exactly what we're seeing also. But a lot of investors ask questions like, well, I'm a little worried about my property in, say, Western Washington is going to sell so fast. And then, now I've got to go find something else. And so a lot of times when you're moving from a really hot market to a market that's still hot, but maybe has a little bit more room to negotiate and maybe, isn't going to go right away. A lot of times I tell investors to tie up the property that they're going to be relinquishing into, buying into, get that under contract and negotiate that as part of, the 1031 exchange, that then they have to list the property for sale, kind of almost doing like a contingent with, a regular seller. And that's working really well right now, because I think most investors have that fear of the 45-day clock and the identification period. But if you can go and tie up some properties that you are planning on buying, then I think that, again, that's going to be really, really helpful. And then another tip I would just share is, get Kyle and your CPA involved as soon as you're thinking about doing this, and not wait till the last minute. Kyle, you have been so great with me. I had a 1031 exchange that, gosh, we got to the end and I forgot to let you know. So I think we were a couple of days before, we were, it was kind of a quick sale that we had gotten. And we were traveling and just completely forgot to call you up and tell you about that. So investors,
we love those.
Right. So don't do that. Don't wait till the last minute.
Yes. If there's one thing for investors to remember that have never done a 1031, you have to set up the exchange before you close on your sale. And I'll get this call once a week where someone will say, Kyle, I hear you're the 1031 guy. My broker, Bob, gave me your number and said, you're the one to talk to. And I say, great, where's escrow at? Let's get it set up. And they'll say, oh, it closed last Thursday. I'll say, well, unfortunately, it's too late to do an exchange. And they'll say, you sure you know what you're talking about? Because, my agent said that it would be easier to set up the exchange after I close on my sale. I'm thinking in my head, like, that agent is about to be known as defendant because they just walk their client into a huge tax bill. So right. I can't stress enough, if there's anything for an investor to remember about 1031s, just make sure you set up before you close on your sale. Like a week or two in advance is ideal.
And I will layer on top what Kyle said for all you brokers out there listening, because we know some of you are brokers out there. For God's sakes, don't give any advice to your clients at all. Basically just say, I'm the real estate person, and once you get blessed off by your CPA and your attorney of what your plan is, then let me know, right? But I can give you Kyle's number, or I can give you an attorney's number, but please don't give your clients any advice on what to do here at all. And for those of you listening, be smart enough not to take that advice from your real estate agent, right? This is a high-tech expertise type of thing. So
yes. Yeah. Agents and brokers, I tell them too, you take on liability when you start discussing real estate tax law. Defer that to us, defer it to your CPA, because if they have basic questions, you don't want to give them wrong answers. I've got no problem deferring questions that I can't get involved in to a CPA, and agents and brokers should definitely feel comfortable doing that as well.
Word. From the 80s.
And then the other thing to point out too, so Kyle, you have some really fantastic calculators on your website. So anytime that I'm thinking about doing a 1031, the first thing I do is run it through the calculator to see if it even makes sense to do the 1031. Sometimes if the taxes are so minimal, then it may be, better just to sell it and just pay the little bit of tax and put that money in your pocket. So it's,
Can I do...
Joe, you might be able to grab that off their website at ipx1031.com under the resources section and throw it down there.
Can I do, well, you brought us up for the tax calculator. Can I do a little overview and a little pitch on 1031s and why it's important to work with us? Do we have time for that?
Sure.
Awesome. So Jennifer knows this. And this is why Jennifer works with us, because 1031s are unregulated and literally billions of dollars have been lost. So you have to be super careful who you work with, because at the end of the day, when you're in an unregulated market, anyone can set up shop, and anyone can take your money and anyone can do essentially whatever they want with it. So there's a lot of great companies out there. We're the exchange division for Fidelity National Financial. So we are the largest QI with the highest level of security and protections. But like I said, there's other great companies. Just make sure they have protections. If all they show you is $1 million Fidelity bond and that's it, I mean, if something happens, then everyone's exchange is going to go belly up. And I've talked to local exchangers that have had that happen. So make sure you look at insurance policies, because anyone can say, oh yeah, we'll put your funds in a trust account, and then they're in Vegas that weekend, or they're investing your money in Bitcoin to make money on it. And that's all they can do. That people can say and do anything. And we've seen it before. So just make sure whoever you work with, that you look at the insurance policies and make sure they have errors and omissions. They have a large fidelity bond, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Word, as they say.
Yes.
Again, right on. Good stuff. Well, again, what's your website then, Kyle? IPX1031.com.
Yep. Right? Yep. And everyone, if people want to, and some people like to do this, if you want to review our financials, they're at fnf.com, fidelitynationalfinancial.com. We're publicly traded, so all our financials are posted online if you want to see what those look like. Super cool calculator that you guys have there. That's fun to play with for all you nerds out there that want to play around with that, right? Yeah. Good stuff.
The other thing I'll mention too about Kyle, of all the 1031 exchanges that I've done, I mean, there's times where, we need a quick answer, and Kyle and his team are so responsive. We actually were closing on a 1031 today, and had some issues with the lender last week. They were having some issues balancing or using all of the 1031 funds because the lender had never done a 1031 before. And so they were saying, well, why would you put more than 25% down? That's the minimum required. And they didn't understand that we needed to use the full amount of funds because I didn't want to pay taxes on that. So Kyle and his team walked them through that. It was a fantastic experience. Again, that was my fourth 1031 exchange with Kyle, and just really, really fantastic experience all around.
Awesome. So thank you, Jennifer.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I just had a really good question for you, and I blanked out on what that would be. I might think of it if you guys keep talking. Anything else we want to cover here?
We don't want dead air.
We don't want dead air. I had a really good one, but I was so excited about Jennifer bragging about how she worked with you that I forgot.
Our website has a plethora of resources, not just the calculator, but we have like an exchange topic books for like CPAs. And you could, if you really wanted to spend some time on the website, you could become a 1031 expert quickly. We don't encourage it, but anything you need to know about 1031s is on our website as well. But again, just feel free to call me or email me if you don't want to go that far.
I remembered my question.
Oh,
so
please.
Do you ever have anybody that their 1031 falls out because they can't find a replacement property?
So it has happened. I wouldn't say it's common. So it really depends on motivation, right? So like if you're deferring an $18,000 tax bill in a 1031 exchange, you're probably less likely to find replacement property than if you're deferring $215,000. If you're deferring $215,000 in taxes in exchange, you're going to look 24 hours a day and stop at nothing to find something. Whereas like if you don't have a huge tax bill, you're probably going to take your time. So I'd say it's a matter of motivation. It's not uncommon. I wouldn't say it's common for people to fail exchanges.
Do you ever have brokers call you up that work with you and say, hey, Kyle, I got an ideal property here for a 1031. You got anybody that needs one?
That had literally never happened until about close to a year ago when I started getting calls from commercial and residential brokers in the city of Seattle trying to sell their properties, which had never happened. But I was like, they would call and they'd say, hey, Kyle, do you have anyone looking for properties? I've got this smoking deal, high cap rate, da, 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 da. I'll say, if you're in Seattle, if you're anywhere but Seattle, I and my clients would be interested. They say, oh, it is in Seattle. And so
your point is nobody wants to buy anything in Seattle.
Well, clearly there are people buying, but not investors. Doesn't seem like there's a ton of investors.
That's what I'm saying. Not all your clients are necessarily investors that are, running in Jennifer's circles. There's just some regular old people that have owned property for a while, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just normal people. But the other question that comes up is like, well, Kyle, if everyone's selling, people are clearly buying because prices here are going up like everywhere else. Who's buying? People from California. That seems to be everyone who's buying are Californians. There was an article in the Puget Sound Business Journal last night that this property in Kirkland went for like $1,100 a square foot. It was priced at $2.5 million, listed at $2.5 million. They turned down a $3 million cash offer and kept the bidding going. and the final 3 people were all from California.
Well, that's a reverse question then. Are you seeing anybody exchange into Washington? You know what I mean? And what's the profile of that person?
Yeah, so it would be it would probably be close to 100% of the time they're from California. It's not like people from, Texas or
And
Florida.
what are the California people buying though? Are they buying apartment buildings, commercial buildings?
So yeah, I mean, there's definitely they're moving the commercial needle, but they're also moving the residential needle too. And a lot of them, it seems to be more from Northern California than Southern California, but they'll say, our San Francisco or Marin County or wherever in the Bay Area is starting to get run down, and we're sick of it. So we're going to go up to Seattle, where we think San Francisco was 20 years ago. And
there you go. There's a tip for all you brokers.
Yes.
I always wear a broker hat.
Yes.
That you guys should do some Facebook marketing down in Northern California when you get a listing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If I were an agent or broker, I wouldn't pay for ads up here. I would pay for ads in California.
Yeah. Word.
You bring up a really good point, Julie, too. A lot of investors ask specifically for agents that have experience with 1031 exchange. And so I think agents, you really need to know this stuff. Again, to Julie's point, not that you're giving advice, but you just at least need to know the basics. So, go to the ipx1031.com website, just understand the basics, promote yourself as an investor agent that understands 1031 exchanges, because you're going to have a lot of, business to do here. So,
I mean, you can literally do a Facebook ad that says, hey, who needs a super awesome 1031 calculator? Hit me up and I'll hook you up. Right? Give them a calculator.
Yes.
Right. See, these are the genius things that I think of that are very simple-minded. Right.
We're hiring in our marketing department, Julie. You'd be awesome.
Well, Joe can attest to you that that's probably a very bad idea. I'm just the idea person, but good stuff, guys. This has been fun. Good stuff. Anybody else? Jennifer, any parting final words before we tell everybody to, follow our YouTube channel so they don't drop the awesome, or they don't miss the awesome podcast that we drop?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that we added a ton of value today. Again, we get a lot of questions related to 1031 exchange. So now we have a resource for you. We didn't, of course, certainly we couldn't cover everything in one, 50-minute call here. But yeah, just, know that Kyle can be a resource in all 50 states. Anyone who is potentially selling in, a high cost of living area or an expensive market and needs access to deals in other markets, we would love to help you at Addicted to ROI. We get a lot of investors doing that. Of course, Kyle's on our side, working on the 1031 intermediary side. So yeah, I mean, I think, thanks for having me. Thanks, Kyle, for being here and sharing your knowledge. And yeah, super, super excited to see investors take action on this strategy.
Yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Joe, where can you find the details about today's podcast?
Yeah, if you'd like to grab the links or show notes or anything involved with this podcast, you can head over to seattleinvestorsclub.com/145. That's seattleinvestorsclub.com/145, or go down to the notes below this video on YouTube or wherever you're watching it.
Good stuff. And number 145, guys, means that we have 144 other podcasts that are, I'll say, badass and super informative. Some of those even with our friend Jennifer Beadles here on there. You don't want to miss those. So if you like the content that we're putting out, please go over to our YouTube channel at Seattle Investors Club. And as they say in YouTube land, which is not us, smash that, whatever you're supposed to do. And don't miss out on, I don't know really what to say. Don't miss out on these awesome podcasts that we're dropping. We have continuous good stuff coming up. Really, really try to cover topics that are not covered all the time by everybody else out there in podcast land and stuff like that. We got some good stuff coming up. Really good stuff. We're trying to twist Natalie's arm to come back on and show us how to calculate from a CPA's perspective, something like a seller financed, type of transaction. So we're at least informed about how that math works, because it's not quite as simple as everybody thinks, right? So working on that, Natalie, if you're listening. Joe's going to be calling you. But anyways, thanks guys again. And Jennifer, any events coming up that we need to know about that you can give a shout out to right now? This might take a few weeks or so to drop. So what's coming up for you in June?
Yeah. So in, let's see, at the end of May, we actually have financial planner Austin Dean coming, talking about how to design your wealth. And then in June, we have a webinar coming up about how to scale up. We've got my friend Corey Dieter, who in just a few short years created $1 million in net worth, and also has, I think she's got, close to 20 properties now in a couple different states. So super excited about that. And then July, Kyle is coming back to our group to talk all about the 1031 exchange again. So if you guys want to get some case study examples, we're going to have Kyle there. So yeah, really, really great stuff, and love collaborating with Julie and Joe, and really just, giving you guys information that you need right now to get to the next level.
And for those of the people out there that have had their head in the sand and don't know about you, Jennifer, where can they find more information to connect with you, our favorite person on the planet, especially on the topic of out-of-state investing, no matter where you're located?
You're too sweet. Yeah. Addictedtoroi.com is the best website where you can find, we've got some great blog articles there. We also have our own community called the ROI Inner Circle. So we help investors within usually the first 30 days go under contract on properties in out-of-state markets that make sense. So kind of what Kyle was talking about, a lot of the markets where you can get cash flow, where you can get, the price per unit is reasonable, where there's, long-term appreciation. So we're really kind of focusing on markets where people are moving to. There's a big population migration happening right now. And, we are at the forefront of getting into those markets, having local teams and helping investors just build and scale their portfolio so they have the time and freedom to do what they want. So like Joe and I, we are traveling across the U.S. with our families, just living our best life. But we just love helping investors get to that next level and having that freedom. So awesome. Would love to help. Addictedtoroi.com.
And I am stuck here in Seattle. So if you need help
in Utah, Julie,
selling any of your properties, Broker Extraordinaire is available here for you. Just hit me up. You know where to find me. And with that, we'll call it a wrap. Kyle, again, thanks. Jennifer, thanks. Joe, love you, brother. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Guys.
Thank you all.
Thanks for listening to the Seattle Investors Club podcast. If you have questions that you'd like to have answered on the show, shoot us an email at info@seattleinvestorsclub.com. Now go out, take that action, and build that real estate business. Thanks for listening.